Well, I wasn't actually expecting to cover this at all, but because it's a pretty quiet release window in terms of films, and my HBO Watchmen review is taking forever to make, I thought why not cover Grounded 2, the making of The Last of Us Part 2, one of my favorite games that released on the PS4, and is a very interesting documentary about how that game was made. So, let's get into it. So as I mentioned, Grounded 2 covers the whole process it took to get The Last of Us Part 2 made. As we all probably know by now, is a very divisive game that had fans completely torn apart with one of the worst arguments and debates in really any entertainment that I have seen in many, many years. And it was just very interesting to see the whole process behind the scenes, what it took to get such a really ambitious game made, as well as seeing some of the backlash from people and dealing with all the setbacks they faced. It was a very tumultuous time for Naughty Dog leading up to the game's release. They had to deal through the pandemic, and of course, there were these massive leaks of the game where so many people got the game spoiled for them and saw a lot of things out of context. I really liked that this documentary doesn't really shy away from any of that. It takes on everything head on, and pretty much every question that you may have regarding the making of this game and what Naughty Dog dealt with as a studio is pretty much answered through this documentary. You see who really did what within the game. You see all the facets of game design, and I think if you're someone who does have a fascination with how video games are made, this is probably one of the better documentaries you could watch. It goes really in depth. It talks about everything from animating the game, the voice acting, the mocap, the direction, the writing, everything. E3, all of that hype build up, right up to the release of the game and having to deal with crunch, which is a pretty big thing within gaming. And I think it's an excellent companion piece to the first Grounded, which went through the full build up to the very first Last of Us game. They both do a great job of highlighting what it takes to get these really defining games in the modern era to work and to be so polished and be so ambitious. Not a lot of games are made like Naughty Dog games. Their stories are just so interesting and they translate clearly well to other forms of media, as the TV show has been a massive, massive hit. And it was really interesting seeing how much all of the people involved really cared about this game and really wanted to do the best by these characters, despite what a lot of people on the internet think. The people behind this game obviously care about The Last of Us, and while they're trying to be ambitious and do these different things and really challenge your perspective, is so fascinating to see that creative process and take those risks that you just don't see. One of the best moments, I think, of the documentary is them going through a really key scene in the first kind of 2 hours of the second game. I'm not going to spoil it. If you've played the game, you know the big thing that happens in that time frame. And them dealing with that and the emotions that come through with having to process this massive shift in the game and the narrative and change a lot of elements to characters that these people really clearly care about was almost sad in a way, seeing the way that they were able to really perform these highly emotional scenes. It once again just gives you a greater appreciation of video game voice acting and performance in mocap, because they're really giving a real performance, and I don't think they get credited enough like what you would see in a film or a TV show. Another aspect that I found really emotional and really leans into the just terrible response that people had with this game was the reaction to the leaks and people taking some things out of context. Sure, some people still don't like the events of the game, even with it in context. It's a very divisive game. I'm not here to argue that. I like the game, and that's it. No one's going to change my mind, and I'm not going to change yours. But the way that some people went over the top and just were absolutely horrific to the people behind this game was appalling, and the documentary does a very great job of shining a light on that. A very highly emotional scene comes from Laura Bailey, who plays Abby in this game. Once again, a very divisive character. A lot of people really love her, a lot of people really hate her. And a lot of the team in Naughty Dog, mainly a lot of the faces like Neil Druckmann and a lot of the performers, were receiving death threats, very serious ones too, where they were really concerned about their safety. And it was just appalling to see that response. I understand if you don't like a piece of media, but to go out and go that far is just disgusting behavior. It's not that deep, man. And the way that it has affected these people's lives was just awful. And I really have to give kudos to the documentary for really shining a light on that. They were sending death threats to Laura Bailey and her kid. It was just disgusting. And that scene really had me almost in tears just to see someone go through that. A documentary can evoke a lot of real emotions out of you because you're seeing a real story here. Someone's life story. It's not something that was scripted or written or directed and polished and all of that stuff. This is someone giving a personal account of what has happened to them. So it does hit more when you see them go through something like that. And then obviously a really big thing, it has been spread all over the internet. Neil Druckmann has talked about that there is room for a potential third game. Now, that is interesting to me. While I am someone who was fine with the ending of The Last of Us 2, I think I would be open to a third game. Although if they never did one, I'd be perfectly fine with that because I think the ending was definitive enough that I was really happy with what they did with these characters. Sure, there's more that you can explore, and I'm sure that they will because there is that hint to the third game. So I am quite excited for that, but we're not going to hear anything about that for many years, I'm sure. In terms of just some criticisms of the documentary, sometimes I don't think it's very well paced. While we do get into the nitty-gritty of it getting made and the developers and everything like that, it does spend a lot of time on making a demo for E3 and building hype. And while I do understand that is a big part of the process, I just would have liked to have seen more about the creative process. Even though we do get a lot of that, I would have liked to have seen even more of that rather than, oh, we're trying to prepare a trailer for E3 to get people hyped. It's just not a big deal in the grand scheme of things when the game is finally released. It is in the build-up and the hype, and that's just the way that gaming works. I get it. But I would have liked to have seen that be reduced a little bit more, focus a lot more on the creative process. So in those moments, I found myself a little more disinterested in the documentary than when we're fully going into the mocap performances, the writing process, their ideas, and their creativity really showing, as well as the process behind actually making the game from the developers, not just a demo for E3. Overall, I do think Grounded 2 is a fantastic documentary. It's really, really good, and I do recommend you check it out. It's not something that I'm going to watch a billion times over, and I think I do prefer the first Grounded documentary a little bit more. I just think that was paced a little bit better than this one, but they had a lot more to cover, I understand that. But overall, I do think it's a really good documentary. Go check it out. If I'm going to give it a score, I don't think it really matters here, but I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's really good. And those are my thoughts towards Grounded 2, the making of The Last of Us 2. Let me know what you think about this documentary in the comments below. I know I don't really cover gaming stuff anymore on this channel, and this is as close to gaming stuff that you're probably going to get on this channel because I've made a separate channel just for gaming. I really want to keep this between movies and TV shows, predominantly movies though. I do have a ton of stuff planned. My Watchmen video, as I mentioned, is taking forever to make. This editing process is very complex. I'm trying to put in a lot of effort into this. We're 5 years removed from the show, so I don't think it's in a big rush, but I would like to get it out sometime soon. In the meantime, I probably will cover Society of the Snow because that was an interesting movie and it's an Academy Award nominated movie that I just would like to discuss with you all. And then as we get midway through the month, I will be seeing stuff like The Zone of Interest and Perfect Day, so expect reviews for those movies. And of course, at the end of the month, we have the big one, Dune Part 2. So hyped for that, so ready to go. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.